Unanswered questions are mounting after a shocking video has been placed in the public domain that purportedly shows sacks and sacks of burning currency notes at the residence of a Delhi High Court judge, Justice Yashwant Varma. What happens next? Do we know everything we need to know? What are the questions we should be asking? I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo story. Unprecedented images at the residence of Justice Yashwant Varma, a serving judge of the Delhi High Court, have shocked India. These images, shared by the Delhi Police Commissioner with the judiciary, you can see them on your screen, show stacks and stacks of what appear to be burning currency notes in the outhouse of Justice Varma's residence. But there have been claims and counterclaims when it comes to this allegation of corruption in the judiciary. While the Supreme Court has placed the entire in-house inquiry report led by the Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court in the public domain, an unprecedented decision to start with, Justice Varma has claimed a conspiracy. He claims A, that the outhouse is quite far removed from his own place of residence, and B, he argues that when a representation from the Delhi High Court visited the scene of the purported crime on the evening of the 15th of March, the fire at the residence started on the night of Holi. There was no sign, he claims, of these currency notes. Meanwhile, other images have emerged several days later that appear to show the debris of these currency notes amid the leaves outside and around the residence of Justice Varma. Justice Varma has been stripped of all judicial duty pending the Supreme Court inquiry. In the interim, there was a huge controversy as it appeared as if he was going to be transferred to the Allahabad High Court till the Bar Association there said, "We're not a dustbin." What does this say about the reputation and credibility of the judiciary? What might happen next? What should happen next? Let me welcome our newsmaker to the program today. We're very privileged to have with us Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, who of course himself has been a judge on the Supreme Court bench and is one of our best-known jurists. Thank you, sir, for your time. As a judge, when you saw those images of those currency notes burning, purportedly, according to the police, at the residence of Justice Yashwant Varma, what is the first thing that went through your head and heart?
See, as a judge, you invariably tend to look at incriminating material closely. Now, there are too many questions being raised here, according to me. You are right that the CD which has been placed on record does give some currency notes burning. How many there are? When was the CD taken? Because it doesn't have a date. What happened if there were currency notes? Was a Panchanama prepared? Was accounting took place? There are some fire people working at the site. All this has remained unanswered. This is also in the background of, different figures floating around as to what was the currency notes there. So figures have varied from anything from 60, 70 crores to 15 crores. But if you look at we have the highest currency note in India is now 500 rupees. You require 200 bundles for 1 crore. Now look at the space which would be required physically and the number of bundles required to make up whatever figures you take in crores. Is that something which is visible? To me, not. There are some currency notes which have been burned. What happened to the burnt currency notes? These are all questions which are very disturbing in a way, because in the last couple of days, there has been huge damage undoubtedly to the reputation of the judiciary. And the story has been played around, sometimes in a very volatile manner, I would say. Depends on who's comparing it, what view is taken about what has been found. But I do believe the man should not be condemned before some inquiry is made. And disturbing as the figures may be, I think the inquiry report should be able to give some answers to what has happened, because they would be able to examine the police personnel, the fire brigade personnel in the home of the residents of the judge concerned, and also, if required, seek assistance of any investigative agency, possibly if some forensic report is required or other things are required, to come to a conclusion in the background of a complete denial by the judge. The judge has said, look, this is an area not accessed by me. It is not his home, technically, in the technical sense. It's an outhouse. I have lived in government accommodations. There are n number of rooms which exist near the servant quarters and other which we never visit. But the fact that notes have been found is certainly a disturbing aspect.
Let me add some questions of my own to your unanswered questions. But before I do that, do you then believe that at the moment, for you, in the absence of complete information from any official source, there's too much we don't know?
I do believe so. Some actions have been taken. So the inquiry has been set up. Judicial work stands withdrawn from him. This is a logical consequence of what has to be done. Can we judge somebody only on the basis of social media? Because, there are judges and there are judges. Reputation of judges do carry. So far, this judge for over a decade has enjoyed an impeccable reputation both in the Allahabad High Court and the Delhi High Court. He was brought from the Allahabad High Court to the Delhi High Court by my predecessor, Chief Justice, who was with my concurrence, because he was supposed to be a fine judge who would get an opportunity to hear different kind of matters in Delhi. So it was like a ground for him for higher things to come, and he has many years to go. These are all questions which are creating a little, let me say, to my mind, everything is not adding up as yet.
So, since you have mentioned the fact that former Chief Justice Chandrachud, with your concurrence, brought Justice Varma to Delhi, let me actually, before we get into other questions, bring up something that has hit the headlines again. An old case, a 2018 case. There is fevered discussion over the fact that Justice Varma at one point was named in a CBI FIR against a sugar mill. He was a non-executive director in this company. The company was facing investigation. And then the case goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sets the case aside, and so on. Now, the reason I bring this up is because you mentioned the reputation of the judge. You mentioned that there was basis to believe that he was competent. He enjoyed a good, impeccable reputation. He was, by former Chief Justice Chandrachud, with your concurrence, brought to his present role. But now the media is looking back at this case and saying, okay, is there something shady here? Right? This is what happens in an allegation like this. Everything gets reopened. What do you make of the revival of this 2018 CBI FIR and the subsequent decision of the Supreme Court to set it aside?
So, if you look at the facts which have come to my knowledge now, it is that he happened to be in a director in one of the sugar mills. That sugar mills was given some advances by a bank, which then made a complaint that these were meant for the farmers. It has not gone to the purpose for which it was to be done. He was for a very short period a director. He was the independent director on the board. And the proceeding, and that is a period of 2009-10 we are talking about. So some 10 years down the line, there is a CBI investigation, which finds he had no role to play. These raises some kind of question. Why is this thing being played up now that he was a non-executive director 10 years ago, in which nothing has been found? And now at this stage, I really can't say whether there was an agenda behind it or not, but the judicial proceedings did not result in any adverse comment on him. He really had no role to play in this. And I do believe that's not of really relevance for what we are facing today.
But I think what you're saying is that there were no other warning signs in the reputation of Justice Varma before this incident, notwithstanding this old FIR, the revival of which you believe is not relevant to the current context. But the initial response of the collegium, there was a very muddled, while the Supreme Court has been applauded now for placing all of this in the public domain, and it's been, this transparency is welcome. The initial response of the Supreme Court was a rather muddled, if I may say with great respect, statement that sought to differentiate between the transfer proceedings and the inquiry by the Delhi High Court. And the Supreme Court press release argued that these two matters are not connected, right? The question that was asked then by many experts was, why was a transfer not halted immediately, or the idea of a transfer not halted immediately in the light of this complaint that the Supreme Court would have been cognizant of? Do you think the Supreme Court, that was a misstep by the Supreme Court?
Speaking for myself, I don't think this was a case for transfer. This was a case where if there was some material against him, the material would be available in Delhi. If he's done something wrong or whether he's not done something wrong, would be available in Delhi. I don't really subscribe to the views of the bar which came in Allahabad High Court that why is he being dumped there? Because he's practiced there at the bar. He was appointed a judge there. He was brought to Delhi. So it was being sent back to his parent court. It does happen, but things have happened in too much of a proximity. So I believe the whole thing should have been examined here in Delhi. Whatever other decision would have been taken later.
Yeah. So let's come back to some of the unanswered questions that you say are in a way mounting up, right? This fire at the residence of Justice Varma takes place on the night of the 14th of March. From what we know now from the documents placed in the public domain by the Supreme Court, the police only informs the court of this at 4:50 p.m. the next day, right? So we don't know. There seems to be somewhat of a delay between the time of the incident and the time at which the Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court is informed. That's question one. Question two, the Panchnama that you mentioned. What should the police have done in these circumstances? Did they do it? Did they not do it? We don't know. Question three, does all the money burn? Is there some money recovered? Is there any money retrieved? What is the amount of the money? How do we so many days later not know the answers to these very specific questions?
Barkha, you're absolutely right. I mean, these questions arise in my mind also. Judge and his wife are not there. A fire occurs in an outhouse. It is informed. Normally, the fire brigade would come. Whether police came before, police came afterwards is also not very clear. At some stage, both were there. If notes were found there, then logically, at least, if nothing else, the quantification of the same should have been there. If they were burnt notes, then I would expect the burnt notes to be preserved, because from ultimate forensic evidence, it could be deciphered broadly as to how many notes were there which got burnt. Now, we are left with some video which is also undated, I believe. I have not seen the whole thing, but as which is appeared in public domain. On this basis, is this the only evidence? There are so many other material which would be relevant if it has been collected in time. We don't know whether anything else has been collected.
But shouldn't the High Court inquiry have addressed these questions? This High Court inquiry...
How can the High Court inquiry is the preliminary nature of inquiry at the first behalf after taking the response of the judge. It can't be an investigation into whatever has happened or into the conduct of the police. So the Chief Justice of India called for a report from the Chief Justice of the High Court, who inspected and gave a particular, on the basis of inspection, gave a report. So I don't think this was the stage to do it, but the materials should have been, I would presume they should have been material if there is an adverse material against the judge, and that would be produced before the inquiry. If nothing of this sort has been done, what should I say?
But you see, unless we're saying that this video is created by artificial intelligence, right? We do see in this video, as we are seeing right now, personnel of the Delhi Fire Service removing what certainly appear to the eye to be burning currency notes. What we don't know is what happened to all of this. Why does Justice Varma argue that by the time the Registrar General of the PPS from the Delhi High Court goes to the site, to this gutted room on the evening of 15th of March, in that account, there is no mention of this currency. The debris seems to have been removed by the morning of 15th March. Who removed that debris? Where did that debris go? Was everything counted and tabulated? Were there only little scraps of sooty burnt notes? Like, there's literally so much we don't know.
You as a journalist, as a good defense and prosecution lawyer, Barkha, posing the same question I would pose. I mean, how could this be collected and thrown away in this environment? I believe police would be required to keep this with itself, at least preserve it.
Maybe it is preserved. We don't know.
If it is preserved, then it should come before the inquiry committee. Where has it been kept? And which are the so-called unburned notes? If there are burned notes and unburned notes, because we are talking about, I think we are bandying about figures which will require boras of it. this kind of amount.
But it does seem to be a room full of currency notes. It seems to be an outhouse full of currency notes.
There is an outhouse, but if you see, this is the end of the room, as I
Yeah,
accessible. It has
yeah,
some shelves. It has some shelves. Something is being thrown from the shelf by these people down,
yeah.
which we can't make out as currency notes. But on the ground floor, there is material which is lying, which certainly looks like currency notes. There is no doubt about it. And those
Hmm.
are burning. Now, as I said, the two things is whether there were any unburned currency notes and the burnt currency notes. Unburned currency notes, were they preserved? Were they counted?
Hmm.
Burnt currency notes, where are they preserved? Because they should not and could not have been thrown away like this.
Hmm.
So this is the most crucial evidence, I think, if you are seeking to pin down the judge on this issue and say, look, you must give an explanation more than just simply denying. Um, I, I don't. That's why I say that too many questions yet answered. So therefore, the Supreme Court setting up the committee was inevitable, and the committee may then try to get all this material and give a more comprehensive report as to what is with the police and the fire department, who saw what. They can examine the department people who went there, the police which went there. They would also possibly examine the staff of the people who stay there, because this is, I assume, if it's a normal scenario, this would be nearer the outhouse, is somewhere nearer the 7 quarter block.
Hmm.
Which others. So did it have access through other people also? Was there lock on this door or not door? If there
Hmm.
was no lock, others would access. Who had the keys if there was a lock? I'm just thinking aloud. All these questions do arise before you come to a conclusion.
But the Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, Justice Upadhyay, in his report, he concludes that prima facie, he believes that access to this outhouse was not possible for anyone but Justice Varma and his family, the domestic help, or the staff that worked there. And wait, what he's suggesting is he doesn't believe that someone from the outside could have just come in from the street and parked this money there. That's what he said while calling for a deeper probe. Now, let's come to Justice Verma's own response. I found a contradiction in his response as well. One part of his defense is that this is not part of the house, technically speaking. There's a boundary wall that separates it. We actually have nothing to do, me and my family, with this outhouse. But at another point, so he seems to be saying, agar wahan paisa tha, I wouldn't even know about it because I don't even deal with this part of the premises. At another point, he seems to be saying that, look, I went with my own PS. The PPS was sent by the Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court. We all went there when I came back from my trip, and there was no sign of any currency. So is he saying if there was currency, it's not mine? Or is he saying there was no currency there? We don't know.
What he seems to be saying from my reading of it is that when he went there, there was no currency. Now, that's one part of it. The second, he says, if you say currency is there, well, this is not strictly part of my accommodation which I use, which is actually normal because, you must have seen some of these government houses, is a number of storerooms and other places. The bigger ones have more of them. I, as judge, would never have visited some of these storehouses, which are so-called storehouses.
Hmm.
But then the issue is, was the storehouse really under the control of the family and him? Or was it something which was just left by the side for people to store stuff? You are
Hmm.
right that justice comes to the conclusion that it would be difficult for an outsider to access. Yet also remember, if you are talking about large currencies in bags, all these houses are secured by police. Almost an entry is made of every person who comes to see you. When you're bringing stuff in, it is seen. So that's why I said it's not adding up. I mean, I really can't at this stage say what is the truth of it. Unfortunately, it's such a scenario where the judge would have to, face this inquiry and see what material comes against him and answer it if the material is against him.
In the absence of what you say, cohesive, sort of a cohesive narrative that can explain everything, when Justice Varma claims a conspiracy, do you lean towards believing that or scoffing at it?
Very difficult for me to say at the moment. I can't scoff at things because the environment has become such, Barkha, today that
Hmm.
anything and everything is possible. Judges decide heavy stake matters. Whether somebody could spend some money for the purposes where agreed, is may not be a very possibility, but remains some kind of a possibility. So to speculate on what the scenario would be, or what is the nature of conspiracy also is saying. See, he must have something in mind when he says conspiracy. We don't know at this stage what is this conspiracy which he has in mind, of which he could have been target. So
Yeah.
difficult to assess at this stage of time.
But the important thing, Justice Kaul, is that any inquiry can no longer be only about Justice Varma. The inquiry has to then say if this money belongs to Justice Varma, who gave it to him? Someone gave this money. Someone placed this money there. This story, whatever it is, by definition, conspiracy or not, goes beyond this particular judge as an individual. If somebody framed him, who was it? Was it with the complicity of his staff? How did the money get in there? Who does the money belong to? If somebody bribed him, as is the purported narrative emerging from these videos, who gave him the money? Was this money being parked for someone else? Who are the other players? This is not a story only about Justice Varma.
No, you are right. See, after all, if there is money and there is some burnt money, where did the money come from? If there is larger money, who has given this money? If, as you are saying, some people think it's corruption, what is this money given for? What is the purpose behind it? If it is in parked, who is behind it? I mean, it cannot be that the money is not owned by anybody. That cannot be the scenario. You are right. So it will certainly require a little more investigation and depth into this area as to how such amount of notes, whatever they are. But the presumption then is that somebody should have preserved the burnt notes as well as the unburnt notes, according to me. Then only can we get an estimate of what is there. And I'm not talking about whether, if it is a corruption, whether 50 lakhs corruption is fine, 1 crore is bad. No, that's not my line of direction. My line of direction is that, is it the notes of some few thousand rupees just set on fire there? If the amounts are larger, where are these notes? It can't be in a, to make a, even if it is 1 crore, which is the minimum I'm taking it,
Yeah.
there must be 200 bundles of 50 rupees notes. We don't have currencies of 2000 anymore. So it's not some higher currency notes which we are dealing with. That is what is creating a little problem. Of course, as you said, that money should not have been found in a judge's place. It creates some doubts. But also that a judge would logically keep money. Let's look at, for a moment, say that there is money with the judge. He'll keep it in an outhouse in a Bora. Not keep it under his immediate custody. Which rational person, even who is making money, it sounds quite silly, actually.
No, it's true that intuitively it sounds quite bizarre, but then if it's a setup, then the fire would have to be a setup too. You see, there are variables are so many because a fire takes place, which is why somebody in Justice Varma's family, apparently his daughter calls for help. The fire service then arrives and finds all this according to the police version of events. Now, if this is indeed if we go with the theory that he's been framed, then is the fire also a setup? I mean, there are too many questions.
You are right, this question arises because if we go up with that line of theory, that yes, it was a setup, then you are right to the extent that did the fire really arise as an accidental fire? So one will also have to see the fire report as to how do they say the fire arose in this building. This is supposed to be, as I've heard, an additional block which was built some few years back, additional room which was built some years back, not part of the main building. And this happens, in COVID times also, in many of the government houses, some things were built both for law clerks to sit at times or to store things. These arose. Was it a temporary structure? It doesn't look like a complete temporary structure because I can see bricks and other things which are inside. What is the outside structure? So there are many, many questions which will arise within the questions which are arising in this thing otherwise.
But finally, let me also argue, since I've argued it from the side of it being a setup, let me argue it from the side of what it looks like. There are bundles of cash found at Justice Varma's residence. Now, the criticism of the judiciary right now, one was that transfer should not have even been a matter of discussion. Now, that part is shelved. He's been stripped of judicial work for the time being. People are saying that judges are being so if, then, why, maybe for themselves. Had this been a politician, had this been me, had this been somebody else, we would have basis this video alone been, indicted. or sent to jail. That judges are too kind to themselves, the collegium system is being questioned, that, it's a boys club, metaphorically speaking. That's how it's being described. Let's argue it from that side, that today the very credibility of the collegium system and the judiciary is under scrutiny.
So let me split this in two parts. The first part is, please understand why a protection is provided to judges. By the very nature of jobs, where in a place like India they may hear 50, 70, 80 cases a day, you are bound to take a final call on, say, 20 matters, 15 matters in a day. You will either say one is wrong or the other is right. You will every day send more than a dozen people unhappy from your court. It's by nature of job you perform. It's not that you can make everybody happy, because you have to take a call. That's, to my mind, the fundamental thing while a protection is provided. Now let's look at other fields, other processes. If some cash is found burned somewhere like this, and the person denies it, would you really think somebody would be convicted on this basis? He will, of course, have to face a trial. You are right there. Some FIR would be registered, some investigation would be carried out, source of funding would be done. Now, because the judge to some extent is protected, a methodology has been devised of this committee being formed and things being done. Let's understand one aspect which I can't differ with is that the impeachment system has not worked at all. So where there have been deviant judges, we found it difficult to account. There have been cases somewhere where people have been asked to resign and they've resigned. Once the internal mechanism finds something fault, people have resigned and gone out of it. Some people have resisted also. Both situations have arisen. So that's the larger question for it to be debated. Should there be a more efficient mechanism to deal with it if, God forbid, such a scenario arises? We all the time come back to the collegium system, unfortunately. Now, post-retirement, I have gone in public domain, and you were one of the people who interviewed me, where I said, look, my own view was that collegium system did a very good work for a time being, but it was an ad hoc system provided in a given situation. But there were problems after that in the system. And when the NJC was brought with the unanimity of the parliament, my own view, but then that's one view of a judge. My own view was that it possibly needed to be read down to maintain the primacy of the judiciary, but have a structure which has other people's participation also. That did not happen. And somehow the whole thing became as whether better judges were appointed earlier or lesser judges were appointed later in the system. Times are different, Barkha. Please remember, we praise Justice Krishna here as an outstanding judge in contribution. Look at his background. He was a politician. He was a minister. He was a person who came from a left-leaning. Transpose this today. Would it be acceptable today? Would it be acceptable if the government of the day says, I want to appoint people with similar thinking as we have? There would be hue and cry over this issue. So the times they are very different. Therefore, a check and balance is necessary in the appointment of judges. I do believe you can't have a zero role of the government. No government of the day will do so. And it is not happening. So what is happening is that there is what I call a backroom dialogue which takes place. Instead of that, I would have any day preferred a front dialogue where we tell the government why particular appointments need to be made or why they don't need to be made. So this is a time for rethink on those issues. Well, the political system is free to do that. And the judiciary is also will deal with the scenario.
So, in other words, keep the primacy of the judiciary, but give the government of the day some role in the appointment of judges, something between the absolutist legislation passed by Parliament and judges only being responsible for appointing their own. Some new model is what you're actually saying.
So, this is again, a very personal view. I felt in the NJC, you had 6 people. Now, this Venkatachalaya's committee had recommended 5. If there was 1 independent, 5 and 3 judges, that balance could have been maintained. Or in 6, if the Chief Justice had been given a casting vote, it could have been maintained. Coupled with the administrative setup being under the Justice Ministry, it should be under supervision of the Chief Justice of India. There were the 2 problems. And if this had been expanded to say, okay, once the system recommends somebody, then the government should not be able to delay the whole thing and appointments take place. I think would have worked better, because today, even after collegium recommendations, it is taking months and days. A day is not even relevant, actually, months and years for appointments to come through, whether for
And
judges.
some still don't.
Some still don't, and you don't know what is happening. Chief justices are taking sometimes six months to be appointed. So this is and the high courts of the day of every state are the final court in 85% of the cases. The Supreme Court interference level is less than 15%. That's the final court. So if they are less manned, unmanned, as it is, the judge ratio is low. Even out of that, it is 70%, and now we are having more retirements than appointments. I don't know where it will go in this manner.
Yeah. Before we let you go, just to come back to the case of Justice Varma, if there are top 3 questions or mysteries that bother you, what would you summarize them to be?
So the first is what has happened, as I said, to the notes, if there were notes there which were unburned. In the same category, what has happened to the burnt notes?
Yeah.
Whether any panchnama was made or not, and where are they stored now? This is one part of the question. Second is examination of the relevant people to find out how and in what manner could notes come into the premises of the judge. This is a question which will have to be answered. And the third aspect, I would say, is depending on the result, what has to be done. Okay. My own view is that if there is some kind of a finding against the judge, then the judge should be asked to resign. People are resigned. But if there's nothing against him, then don't damn him, because he has enjoyed a good reputation. And reputations travel, Barkha, far and wide. It's not that in every system there are deviant people and performing people. And so far we had no occasion really to have any reason to doubt his credibility. Today an episode has occurred. He has to face the challenge which he has faced today.
Many questions, not enough answers, but Justice Kaul, thank you for helping us making some sense of it all. It has high stakes implications, not just for Justice Varma as an individual, but for the judiciary, for the balance of power between the different pillars of our democracy and for our country. So it is a high stakes case with deep consequences. Thank you so much, sir. Take care and see you soon. Thank you. Bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.